Hello and welcome to the part 2 of our tutorial session ArcViz. And here and in the previous part we learned how to bring in our drawings, our 2D drawings, clean it up from AutoCAD, then importing it into 3ds Max. And now we're going to learn how to create the walls. Okay, we have the plan imported, cleaned and imported, and the basic things we need: the wall, the window points, and the door openings and all that. So what we now do is we'll start creating our walls for the first floor. Basically, this is the first floor and this is the ground floor and top floor. And so right now we're going to start creating our walls. But before we start creating walls, and I'm going to take you through a couple of things that would be very essential with what we're working with. First, we're going to talk about a snap, because we're going to actually create the walls exactly to fit what this is. And since we have imported accurately in millimeters, which is in our unit setup in millimeters, and I've always advised that whatever you're doing, just leave this as default as it comes with, which is the inches, because there are a couple of reasons. I had a chat with a friend some time ago, and we had run through and why this should be left and why it shouldn't be changed. If you're going to be importing a couple of other models, if you change this, it might actually distort it in a way. Not distort it, basically distort in size, uniformly scale it, or scale it, either reducing or increasing it. So right now we should advise that we leave this as it is. So then, and of course we choose to leave this as millimeters, because when we were importing equally, we had this to be scaled to millimeters. We had our unit reset to millimeters, and which we have it fine like that. So now, and so whatever we create here and we input as millimeters, whatever unit comes in, if at all you're going to create a box, it comes in as millimeters, and you can see it right here, it's in millimeters right here. And so this is a good thing for what we need. Now we are going to start. Yes, I was talking about a few parameters we'd have to set. We'll have to make sure we turn on our snap. We have to turn on our snap setting, and we have something in our snap setting here. We have, if you hold it down, to left click to hold it down, you see a couple of other parameters here, and which the 3 means it can snap to anything in a 3-dimensional space. Like now, this, if that thing is in the air, like a certain units above z, the 0z axis, it can snap into it if there is a point there, that if there's an object here that we can actually snap to. Then the 2 means it only snaps in the 2D plane, which is the x and y, depending on which viewport you're on. Like now we have the 4 viewports. If you're on a left viewport, it only snaps to which these y and z. This is the left viewport, and it only shows the plane is this y and z plane. It only snaps to that plane. And if we are on the front, it only snaps to the x and z plane. And I guess you can see that it's quite small here, but if you take a close look at it, you can actually see what is happening where I'm moving my mouse over right now. And now the top view, it only snaps to the x and y. But when we come to our perspective view, it chooses the default, which is the x and y, which is actually the one on the ground plane, which is actually something on like our flat plane. So it's going to snap to the 2D plane basically. And when we now choose 2.5, it's a very interesting one, very useful. It comes in very handy when we'll be working on later parts in this tutorial session. And it's going to have it's going to snap to any 3D point, but wherever it's going to drop, it will drop it on the 2D plane. Well, this might be a little tricky to understand, but when we get there, I'm sure you'd understand that. So right now, let's switch to our 3D. We can as well choose 2, because our plane is 2. We're still going to be working on this 2D plane right now, but because we would eventually get into a 3D point without we knowing that at the point, I guess we really need to just put it on a 3D snapping space. Okay, right now we now go to our create panel, and on our drop down from standard primitives, would choose AEC extended. From our AEC extended, we would choose the wall which we are going to use, and a couple of things in the wall would have to know. We'll have to adjust our width if it's not done yet, because I've been using this before, so this is already set to 225, which is the default for the thickness of our walls we're using right now. What we do here, our 9-inch blocks are 225, and the 6-inch blocks, which is the 150 wall, is 150. So for now we choose 225 because our walls here, even every wall is 225, which is the 9-inch wall and all that. So, and our wall height by default, let's choose a 3000 because we always use that as a default. We can have walls of 2400 depending on what the space is like. So basically we're still going to use this as a 3000, which is a 3-meter wall. So right now, and there's one other parameter, which is justification. Justification is where it creates the wall, where it picks as a point, an origin basically for the wall it creates. Let's go to our top view because that's where we're going to be creating from, and we have our snap tool on. That's why you can see that yellow cross that snaps to every point, every vertex point on our object. Okay, first thing, and actually, okay, in the previous part I showed you that you could select this guy and put it in a selection set basically. One other thing is, because when you get to have your scene load up very much, you tend to mistakenly pick all these things and you move them around by mistake. You don't want that to happen. So what we do basically is we can freeze this particular object. We can tell it freeze selection, but once we freeze it, we don't really get to see all these things clearly, and I think it gets too not clear basically. So what we do is, let me undo. Then what we now do to freeze, we right click and you say object properties. From object properties you can go to your general parameters, general tab on the object properties. Then you now tell it to freeze, but while you're telling it to freeze, now tell it not to show frozen in gray, so it doesn't gray out the frozen object. It just sees it as if it's there and it's not frozen. So let's accept this for this particular object. So right now you cannot select this guy. You cannot select this guy, and obviously you won't make any mistake getting it to be moved by mistake or something. So, and one other setting that you would not have if you've not done this before is you won't have it to snap to a frozen object. So to get it to snap to a frozen object, actually you have to right click this particular button, right click, it brings up this dialog, the grid and snap setting. Now then you can now go to the options and you now tell it snap to frozen, turn it on. By default it's off because then it doesn't snap to frozen object, so you now turn it on and it snaps to frozen, so it enables that. A couple of other displays here, we'll talk about them later, but right now, which are you could as well just leave as default, and my wife is disturbing me here. Alright, so then one other setting is, first thing, you have this set grid points by default, but what you do is you actually turn it out, then you now turn on vertex instead, just vertex, because that is what you need by now. So you could close this and let's accept all that setting, and that is how you get to snap this guy. Before some people start telling me, no, this thing doesn't snap to the frozen objects and all that, so probably get something like that. Alright, so now let's start creating our wall. This tutorial is going on for too long. Let's start creating our wall. Then when we choose our wall, just what we were saying before, our justification, by default you get it to be in the center, which is not very useful for the kind of drawings we have. If we tell it to center, you can see it actually centers the wall, the core of the wall to where we snap to. So what we want is, we either want to snap it to the left or we either want to snap it to the right. So I think I prefer snapping it to the right. You could as well just snap it to the left. Let's take a look at what we have. And snapping it to the left, you can pick from here. Then snapping it, if you pick from here, you can see how basically you can see clearly where it puts the wall, which you don't want that. So if you put it to the left, so it goes, and fine, we're good. Now you can start creating your walls, picking it we were creating the external walls first. So to pan your view, because you can't pan while you're creating an object in 3ds Max just like you can do that in AutoCAD. I don't know why they didn't incorporate that feature, but you can do that. But there are a couple of other plugins that could do that for you, but the best way to do it, if you don't have that done, if you don't have that plugin installed, basically while you're trying to move, you press your I on your keyboard and it centers the cursor to the viewport. So wherever the cursor is and you click I, it picks that location and it centers it to the viewport. So if you're here now and you press your I on your keyboard, it centers that position to the viewport. Alright, so it snaps to the center basically of where your mouse is. So it actually moves the viewport to the center of where your mouse is. So we go ahead and create our walls. I keep pressing the I, then I keep going, and should in case I have my point picked wrongly, I can use my backspace to get it out. Then I can continue again. Then even if you have that kind of problem, you could just leave it and go ahead, because you could still adjust that later while it is done. And it says world point, and you accept that, yes. And to cancel this process, you could just right click and cancel that. Now we have our exterior walls, and the same way we go for all other walls in the scene, the same way we do the interior walls. You click and you start creating. By default you know what to do because it keeps snapping and you know where to get it done. And I'll leave this as this to show that normally we don't leave any opening opened. We close up all the openings, and our walls and windows while creating we parametrically create these openings, and those are the things that we use to create our openings. So I'll leave that and go ahead. Basically we're actually meant to close up all our openings. We're not to leave anything opened. So, and I'll show you how to get that done. So right now what I'm going to do, I'm going to pause this video for a while and come back with a completed wall created. Okay, now we have our wall completed, and of course I left a couple of mistakes there, so I'll show you how to get them adjusted and get them worked. And of course we're going to show you how to bring the walls as one, because we don't want to have multiple walls coming in as we have wall 1, wall 2, wall 3, wall 4, various walls like that, and we don't want to have that. So we're going to merge the whole thing together, and in the next lesson we're obviously going to show you how to get the walls, the doors and the windows into place. Alright, now for this particular one we have this, we are not supposed to leave any opening, and you can now adjust that by picking the wall, selecting that particular wall. Let's turn off our snap. You can see that particular wall, we're going to select that wall. Then every wall has a sub-object level which you can use to adjust various things on that. And so you can pick, if you pick the vertex, you can see that it has that point which it had snapped, which you had used to create it. You can see that small tiny crosshair there, then, which is like our vertex, which is like a vertex that holds the wall. So you can actually drag that and drag it into that one. If you turn on a wireframe mode, and you can just drag it into it. You can just place it, if you can precisely, basically you won't be able to do that, but you can just place it just a little bit inside, and that's fine. And any other problem we have, we can just adjust, and if you have more problems, you could just post it down there and I would rectify that. You could mail, you could post it as a comment, and I would explain how that is worked. So right now what we're going to do is we're going to join the walls together. We're going to merge all the walls together, because we can attach walls together, and you can see that. And you can as well just pick attach multiple, and it brings a drop down. It only shows what it's compatible with, and which is just the walls, and you can select all that and attach. Then we have our wall as one single object, which now we can see it out in 3D, which well, I guess I should have shown you that while you're creating it, it does that by default. So let me just show you how that is done while you're picking your point. This is what happens from that top viewport. So you can see that while we were looking at it in the top viewport, it's actually creating it just that way. So I guess this tutorial is quite understandable, and you'll be able to come up with something yourself before we get back on the part 3, which is going to be using our AEC doors and windows to cut in and open our openings with our reference points from the plan we imported in. And I guess this was useful, and stay tuned till I come up with the next tutorial. Thank you.